Secretary of State, you're celebrating the NHS's 70th birthday with less than the average they've been having for the last 70 years.
Well, I think it's very important to be upfront that this is not going to mean an immediate end to pressures on the front line where people are working extremely hard. You've covered a lot in your programmes, and nor is it going to mean an immediate end to money worries in the NHS.
But for a 70th birthday and making a big song and dance about 70 years old, you'd have thought you could do better than offer less than what they've been getting on average for the last 70 years.
Well, I think it is significant that after 10 years of austerity, when we've had incredibly difficult decisions to make with national finances to get the economy back on its feet, that we are now moving to quite close to the long run average as opposed to the much, much smaller rises. But what I would say is the debate we often have, in fact I'm sure I've had it with you on this programme, is how much do we spend compared to other Western European countries? And we spend at the moment about the Western European average as a proportion of our GDP. By the end of this 5-year period, we will be spending nearly as much as France currently spends. So France and Germany are the two of the biggest spenders, and we are making a very big statement.
But it's completely unfunded, and this is exactly what you accuse the Labour Party of doing. We hear it all the time.
Well, it's not unfunded at all, John.
Well, you haven't told us how it's going to be funded.
No, we made an announcement that we are prepared to commit to a £20 billion a year increase.
Yeah, but you haven't told us where it's going to come from.
If you'll let me, I'll be very happy to answer those questions. But the precise details of how it will be funded will be outlined in the budget. But we have made clear that the broad way that we intend to fund it is threefold. Firstly, because we won't be paying subscriptions to the EU, and the British people voted very clearly in that referendum. Whichever side of the debate you were on, they voted that they wanted their money to be spent on key public services like the NHS and not on subscriptions to EU membership. Secondly, economic growth. And thirdly, and Theresa May was very clear about this, if you're making an increase in funding of this scale, saying that we're going to move to French levels of GDP, that is also a commitment for the tax system to bear.
But all three of those things are completely sort of vague. I mean, we're talking about a situation in which growth is falling. Even the British Chambers of Commerce today have had to cut next year's prediction for growth. And your own OBR, your own agency, has said to you, there is no Brexit dividend. So it can't be coming from that. It can't be coming from growth. Where is it going to come from? Tax, tax, tax?
Well, we have said that there will be an implication for tax, but let me just say this.
A tax on poorer people too.
I want to answer your question. You said, why aren't we spelling it out in detail? And I'll tell you why. Because, as you know very well, these things are always spelt out in detail at budgets. Now, this agreement yesterday that was announced was agreed with the Chancellor and the Treasury. And the reason that the negotiations were difficult was because, quite rightly, Philip Hammond, who very much wants to put more money into the NHS, but he quite rightly said it must be a promise that we can honour. And we wanted to give the NHS an indication. This is actually what the NHS asked us. They said, well, tell us how much money you can put on the table. And I was saying this should be for the long term, so for the first time it's a 5-year settlement. The NHS has never had that, and there's going to be a 10-year plan behind that. They will then have 6 months to put together that plan. And then when that plan is finalised, providing it meets our key objectives, then we will have the budget and the plan, it will all be approved, and we will say precisely how we're going to raise that extra funding.
That's all about the long-term strategy, which you've talked about a lot in the past. The fact is, you codded this together and you thought, well, we'd better get this out before the MPs come in to vote on Brexit votes this week, and the Lords too. This is a cynical ploy.
John, that's absolute nonsense.
The timing is.
No, it's not absolute nonsense. Let me just tell you, the reason that we wanted to do this now is because we wanted to give the NHS time to do a plan. We also wanted to do something ahead of the NHS's 70th anniversary on July the 5th. And I have been saying for a year now that the way we fund the NHS is crazy, because we have these hand-to-mouth settlements year in, year out. We need a long-term plan, a long-term funding settlement. Theresa May listened to that, accepted that view, announced before Easter that's what we were going to do. Then we had these discussions to work out the sort of levels.
Clear.
And that is a very important step for the government to take. And it's not unreasonable, and you will have had this discussion 100 times with
But
cabinet ministers.
It was Mrs. May who came out and started talking about the bus and the 350 million that was ridiculed, has been ridiculed ever since, but which Boris Johnson paraded around during the Brexit campaign and said we're even going to spend more than that. It's simply not true that you're going to be able to get out of Brexit the kind of money Boris Johnson was talking about. And that's precisely what she was indicating.
Well, we are not saying that all this extra 20 billion is going to come from the fact that we're leaving the EU. You've got the transition period, we're going to be continuing to pay our divorce bill, and there isn't going to be any money from not paying the subscriptions because they're going to be netted off against the divorce bill. But by the end of this period, we will have some benefit from the fact that we're not paying those subscriptions. But Theresa May could not have been clearer. That alone isn't enough. And yes, there's an implication for taxes. And yes, we're going to be completely upfront with the British people as to what those implications are when we come to the budget.
Can you guarantee that when it comes to it, it will not be the poor who've been so badly hit by austerity who will end up footing this bill?
Well, I'm not going to predict the exact contents of the budget. What I know for sure is that, first of all, we will make clear exactly how this is going to be paid for. And secondly, that the Treasury has made a commitment that it knows it can honour. So this is something that the NHS, it's a promise the NHS and the people of this country can bank. And it's very significant because...
Well, why has it got this Brexit element in it when we're talking about the short term? Not your longer term plans, but the short term. Here's Sarah Wollaston, Dr. Sarah Wollaston, MP. The Brexit dividend tosh was expected, but treats the public as fools. She said that in response to what Mrs. May said yesterday.
We are saying that over the next 5 years, yes, there will be less subscriptions to pay to Brussels, and towards the end of that period, that is something that can help the NHS. But we are also saying...
Then why were you not prepared to stand in front of that bus with Boris Johnson and say, folks, my department, me, 350 million, all the rest of it, if you believed it, if you believe it now, did you believe it then?
I was on a different side in the Brexit debate, as you well know, John.
That's no excuse. It's either true or false. It's your department.
Yeah, so I think you'll find plenty of comments from me saying why that gross figure is not something that you can depend on. But that is not what we're saying either. What we're saying is that there is a net benefit from not paying subscriptions to the EU. There's a extra burden through the tax system. We've been completely open about that. Now, can I just point out...
No, because I know you're short of time, you've got a cabinet
ahead. You're the
ahead.
questioner, John.
So I want to ask you quickly about cannabis oil.
Okay.
Yeah, you're happy to have legalised tobacco smoking. You're happy to have legalised alcohol. But when it comes to something with a known therapeutic capacity to assist terribly ill children, you do not spring into action when you hear that the child is being deprived of that cannabis oil. It takes 2 days to get this sorted. Surely you should have been right onto the phone right away and saying, we're going to do this right now.
Well, I think that the Home Secretary acted pretty quickly in that situation, and I also
think...
Well, the
child had a terrible setback.
Yes, but he released that cannabis oil, and he's also said that he's going to review the law and how it operates. And
he's only given 20 days. 20 days.
Well, from my perspective, I do believe there is good clinical evidence that says that it can be beneficial in these situations, and I think that this is something that no one can look at those heart-rending stories and say that we're getting this right. And so we're going to have a proper review. We do need to look at the clinical evidence, look at the legal situation, make sure there aren't unintended consequences. But that's what Sajid Javid has said he's prepared to do.
Secretary of State, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you.